Stops more or less here. So if you don't mind, I would like to say a few things, and I will express them, I think, better in English. As the director said, I'm the head of the European Commission office for Belgium. But I'd also like to say that what I'm going to say here express my personal views. I have written a bit about the crisis and about what is happening in Europe. I am a civil servant, but I am also a European citizen, so sometimes I take the floor on these issues. I was very happy to receive the invitation by Monsignor Athanasius about, and the theme, Qvo vadis Evropi. And I think the first time maybe in my career in preparing for this session and trying to answer this question, I had the feeling of answering maybe Brexit. I don't know. It's true that quite a lot of things that have happened would tend to lead me into answering this. I will also have a few solutions, I think. I am not pessimistic. But it's true that there has been a convergence of things recently that are quite worrying. First of all, it was mentioned before, there were the results of the European elections. I think the people have not analyzed it enough, maybe in Brussels, what these results were all about. For the first time, the European citizens have sent to the European Parliament 1/3 of members of Parliament who are, at the best, Eurosceptic, at the worst, Europhobic. There are a number of parties for the first time in the European Parliament who have as only goal to dismantle the European project altogether. And this is not, I don't think, very constructive. There are also the figures that we saw on the economy, and particularly figures on unemployment and youth unemployment, which shows that the crisis is still very much present. There was also the reappearance, suddenly, in the turn of the year, of the words Brexit and Brexit. These acronyms that, with another element this time, saying, well, if a country happened to leave either on its own decision or would be forced to leave the Eurozone or the Union, this would have less impact on the global entity than 2 years ago, so this is a new element that we have to take into consideration. And then, of course, there are the events that happened earlier this week in Paris and also yesterday in my country, in Belgium. These are issues that tackle, I would say, very much the essence of our values and the essence of the European project altogether, and I'll come back to that. I think that if we have to analyzes the crisis and what happened in the crisis, I think this crisis evidenced two losses. It evidenced the loss of the common goal, and it evidenced the loss of the people. Regarding the common goal, the crisis showed the appearance of a divide, but actually it wasn't exactly where people expected the divide to be. When we go to speak to Europeans, and I give a lot of speeches, people always question me on the new member states, the enlargement, this went too fast, we cannot cope with this, and so on. And a lot of people were actually expecting an east-west divide. And actually during the crisis, what came out there very quickly was a much more traditional divide, a north-south divide, with the element of solidarity at the center of this. And you spoke a lot about it already in the beginning of this day. So this is something we have to look into very quickly and think about this, because, as you can see also, this divide could become a fracture. So with, I would say, more radical expressions of people's opinions in national elections. And we are seeing tendencies of these things. So this is something we have to really think about. And then the loss of the people, because I think one of the important things in the crisis, I don't think we have reflected on this enough, even I think within the European Commission or in the institutions, is the fact that a lot of the people, a big chunk of the people, that were traditionally neutral about the European project, because it's difficult to understand all of the intricacies of the project itself. Even I don't understand all the institutional intricacies, but were in one way or another neutral, favorably neutral, in the sense that for a long time these people thought that this project was beneficial to them. And in public perception of what happened during this crisis, a lot of people replaced one of the other core values with solidarity of the project, which was protection by the word austerity. And this is something, these are the people that went massively to the Eurosceptic or Europhobic parties, and it's going to be very difficult to get them back on board. And one thing that I repeatedly say in Brussels is that it's not because we're going to just have a 0.5% of growth that you're going to bring massively all these people back and support the European project. I think we have to, and this is one of the things I want to see also in the solutions afterwards, we have to, I would say, look more globally at the situation. Now, before coming to the solutions, I think we need to recall two things, and two important things. The first is that, contrary to what we might think, the European project is not a finalized project. It's still very much a project. And it's a project that can go anyway. For 50 or 60 years, we were able to keep, let's say, notwithstanding a lot of crisis, but we were able to keep, I would say, a sort of linear path, bringing in more member states, bringing in more competences. This was actually what was also the line in the founding treaties and the declarations of the founding fathers of the European Union, to make this thing a progressive thing. But for 60 years, we were able to keep this, I would say, pace. I'm not sure, and in hearing, that everybody agrees or would agree nowadays that this thing is going to be, this linear path is there forever. It could very well go another way. And this is something that we need to think about. The other element that we need to think about, I think it's a more optimistic one, but it also has strong impacts. I think we should never forget either that this, amongst, I would say, the tens of thousands of international organizations that we have in the world, this is the only one, I dare say, in history, that has a direct impact, a direct daily impact on the lives of 510 million people. And that's where the voice of the people is important, because if people have this feeling that this project is beneficial, is good for them, they will follow it and they will support it. If they don't have this, if they lose this impression, like more and more the case today, then they will have a tendency to join, I would say, the forces that are going to be fighting against this project. Now, what can we do, and where do we go from here? I think there are basically two elements that we need to put on the table. We need two things. We need a vision, and we need the way to communicate this vision, to explain this vision. And that's where our debate now, it's going to follow, about education, comes very much to the forefront. We need a vision, we need a holistic vision, but a vision also that goes beyond the economic pillar. Juncker, the president, the new president, put out, and I must say, some interesting rules by focusing on a number of priorities. He also launched this plan that our colleagues talked about this morning, the 315 billion euro plan. I think there's an interesting sign in the back of that, independently of the monetary issue or the financial issue. I think Juncker put this on the table as a means, a sort of little slap in the face of the people in Europe, the authorities, public authorities and the private sector. I think it was a way to say to, I would say, the authorities, do you still believe enough in this project to put 315 billion euro on the table for the sake of European projects? 350 million, they will find it. It's not a question of money. It's much more, I think, a challenge to the authorities in Europe. Do you still believe enough in this project to do this? I think this is an interesting issue. But we need to go further than that also. I think we are in the European Union, we are living a real, what we call an identity crisis. And if you do an identity crisis, you have to look into something more holistic. I think it could be time, it is time, that we were talking about the values this morning, earlier this morning. We need to revisit these values. We need to put on the table a vision where we bring in the immaterial side, the non-material side of the European project. Is this, as it was meant to be, a societal project? Is this a civilizational project? We need to look into the issues of empathy, of values, the core values, of the essence of the European project. What is the founding principles that guide this project? In a way, we need to put on the table also the issue of the European dream. And that's where this whole notion of the importance of the education sector, the civil society in Europe, is so important. And I have the impression that in the current and the past years, we have not paid enough attention to this dimension. In the middle of the crisis, we have been able, and we saw that this morning, to build, if we have a European house, we have been able, in the middle of the crisis, to find the agreements, to consolidate the monetary, the budgetary, the banking, the economic pillar of the house Europe. But we have a whole set of things to do to consolidate the human branch. And if one day we want to go a step further towards, I would say, the political union or whatever it would be called, we cannot build the European political union if we don't have, I would say, a solid basis on the two pillars of our project. And just as I would like to just mention in that respect two very recent contributions. One was an individual one, and one was a collective one. On the individual one, I would like to just read two paragraphs of what I think is one of the most important speeches delivered in the European Parliament. This was on 25th of November, so not long ago. It is a message of encouragement, says the person, to return to the firm conviction of the founders of the European Union, who envisioned a future based on the capacity to work together in bridging divisions and in fostering peace and fellowship between all the peoples of this continent. At the heart of this ambitious political project, was confidence in man, not so much as a citizen or an economic agent, but in man, in men and women as persons endowed with the transcendent dignity. And he finished in his last paragraph, dear members of the European Parliament, the time has come to work together in building a Europe which revolves not around the economy, but around the sacredness of the human person, around inalienable values, in building a Europe which courageously embraces its past and confidently looks into its future in order fully to experience the hope of its present. This person, as you might have guessed, was Pope Francis I. That was for the individual contribution. And for the collective contribution, I would just like to say that I happened to be in Paris 5 days ago. I was one of the 1.7 million people who marched in the streets of Paris, one of the 5 million people who marched during the weekend in France and Belgium and all over the world to defend to defend something. On everything I thought, I heard, I saw and heard, and everything I discussed during that very particular day, very strong feeling was a reference to the values, to the need to work together, to reference to education, to restore our values, and the values of all in respect of all religions and of all beliefs. I think this was a very strong message. And if, as you know, the word being Charlie is a reference, I would say, to all of these messages that were given, then yes, I think that I can say with many others, je suis Charlie, il m'est Charlie, il m'est Charlie, ça c'est vrai, c'est pas